Coming to you from Studio A here at Proven Winners Color Choice Shrubs. It's time for the Gardening Simplified radio, podcast, and YouTube show with Stacy Hervella, me, Rick Weist, and our engineer and producer, Adriana Robinson. Well, over the past few weeks, the Gardening Simplified show has gone on the road. We've gone our separate ways on trips, and today we'll share some of those adventures with you. Stacy went to Japan, Adriana went to Australia, and I went to Costa Rica. Now, pura vida. It's pure life. What a wonderful life it is. I loved Costa Rica. It was great.
I have heard great things. I have also had people say to me, if you go to Costa Rica, they're going to have to drag you away because you're going to go crazy from all the plants.
And there are many Americans, many Canadians who live in Costa Rica. I looked, U.S. Department of State said 120,000 private U.S. citizens, many including retirees like me, and tourists live in Costa Rica, so it's pretty cool. 25% of the land is conservation with 12 ecological zones, over 100 national parks, reserves, and protected lands. It was incredible. And the people there I found to be very, very friendly. The people are very proud of their country. They're proud of their ecodiversity, the plants, the birds, the animals. Every morning at 7 o'clock in the morning on the radio, they play the national anthem.
Oh.
And I don't know if you've ever heard the national anthem of Costa Rica, but it's a pretty cool national anthem. You get adjusted pretty quickly for breakfast. Forget bacon and eggs. You quickly learn to eat gallo pinto. It's a breakfast staple, essentially beans and rice.
Love it.
Very good. The people there, I think, are very healthy. Gallo pinto means spotted rooster. I don't know why. Nobody could tell me why, but it means spotted rooster. Of course, as far as agriculture and horticulture are concerned, coffee, rice, bananas, sugarcane, beans, citrus, plantains, which I found interesting, Stacy. You eat those for breakfast, chopped up and fried. And just like clematis or clematis, some people call them plantains and some people call them plantains.
Or platanos. If you're in Costa Rica.
There you go. Exactly. Or platano, whatever it may be. Papayas, passion fruit, dragon fruit, coconuts, pineapple, watermelon, cantaloupe. It goes on and on. And Stacy, I thought of both you and Adriana often on my trip because if bird watching is a favorite pastime of yours, Costa Rica is a must-visit place.
You know, I've read about so many different birding excursions and hotels, resorts that are specifically up in the mountains for birding, and it's definitely my dream to do one of those one day. And you saw some amazing birds.
Amazing birds. The toucans, of course, were just unreal. It brought me back to my childhood when I'd eat Fruit Loops for breakfast, toucan Sam.
So were those just common, like, oh, there's another toucan? Because you had multiple photos of them.
Yeah, and no, it was more so when we got into the rainforest area near the volcanoes. That's where I really saw the toucans, the sloths, which were just amazing. Had some personal interaction with some snakes.
Ooh.
Yikes, like the eyelash pit viper. And this is a snake that preys on hummingbirds.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Zip lining, they tell you not to go zip lining because it's not too safe. But it was fine, and I got up close and personal with the birds, hummingbirds.
Wow.
There's a social fly catcher called a kiskadee. I thought that bird was beautiful. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can see a picture of that. I got a kick out of these white-throated magpies. They look like bluebirds. No, not bluebirds. They look like blue jays. With a little tuft on their head. And of course, in Costa Rica, it's nice and warm, so the restaurants are open air. And every morning I'd watch these guys, the locals there call them hurracas. And these hurracas would gather on tables and railings outside of the restaurant, and you'd watch them have a little conference, a little meeting. And they would debate, and then finally one of them would be knocked to the ground, and I guess that's the designated haraca, to make a venture into the restaurant to see what kind of food or snacks the haraca could find. And I watched every morning, someone would be pushed to the ground, the haraca would fly into the open-air restaurant and return about 30 seconds later with 2 sugar packets in their mouth. And they would drop them on the floor, and then there'd just be an all-out brawl. They'd fight over the sugar. And then the whole thing would repeat itself.
Wow, so, not many places can boast free entertainment at breakfast. So that is impressive.
But it was fun for me. I live in Michigan and enjoy the hummingbirds, the Baltimore Orioles in spring and summer. And to see them vacationing down there in Costa Rica was pretty cool. Speaking of flying, it took 4 attempts to land the plane in Liberia.
Oh, dear.
4 attempts. Now, I didn't land the plane. It was the nice Delta Airlines pilot who landed the plane due to debris on the runway, potholes, and torrential downpours. And that brings me to my next point. If you're going to go out traveling and enjoying plants, my gimmick for the week, these are life hacks you can use. Travel on the shoulder seasons, because you get better deals and fewer crowds. Just don't go when the rainy season is supposed to end. Torrential downpours, unbelievable. Tropical depression, Hurricane Sarah, and that leads me to my limerick for the week. I had an inspiration, eureka. Why not travel to Costa Rica? Despite the rain I went, the weather did circumvent my route through lovely Topeka. Actually, I was circumvented through Atlanta, but Atlanta doesn't rhyme with Costa Rica.
Fair enough.
Okay, thanks. As far as plant material is concerned, bird of paradise is a big deal in Costa Rica. But interestingly enough, it's really not bird of paradise. It's heliconias. Heliconias are native to Central and South America, whereas the bird of paradise, Strelitzia, was a plant that I would often bring up to the garden center. People love it. The foliage looks like bananas.
Yeah.
Same thing with heliconia, which the hummingbirds in Costa Rica just love. They call it false bird of paradise or Pico de Loro, parrot's beak, because they do look like some of those toucans pictures of the toucans that I shot.
They do. When I was at the New York Botanical Garden, they had an incredible collection of heliconias, and the common name that they would usually put on them was lobster claw.
Yes, lobster claw was another one.
Which is accurate.
Right. You're right.
As is the parrot's beak. So
you're right. Yeah. Just amazing, the biodiversity in Costa Rica. So if you're into plants, you're into birds, I recommend you go. The Guanacaste tree, what a huge crown on that tree, provides shade in the hot weather. Some people refer to it as elephant ear tree because of the seed pods. The blue water in the waterfalls in proximity to the volcanoes in the northwestern province of Guanacaste, just unreal. I mean, waterfalls in general. And then to see plants like Philodendron cordatum just lining the walls, plants that I used to sell in the garden center and hanging baskets and just growing in the wild. I mentioned the coffee, the landscape, and the vistas. It's so diverse. There was a really cool tree called sandpaper leaf. You grab the foliage, and it is as rough as sandpaper.
Interesting.
Unreal. The snakes, the sloths, the lizards on the roof, on the clay tile roof, the leafcutter ants.
Ooh,
watching them.
Those are amazing.
They're fascinating. The monkeys, I could not get used to the howling monkeys or the howler monkeys. Man, do they make a racket at dawn and at dusk. So the papaya trees made me think of Steve Miller Band. I brought you a crate of papayas, chewing on sugarcane. So the long and short of it is, if you get the opportunity to go to Costa Rica, don't go during the rainy season, even though the rainforest was just beautiful. But I recommend that you not go during the rainy season. But what a wonderful country, wonderful people, and horticulturally, agriculture, birds, it's a paradise.
Did you see any cool frogs?
Yes. incredible frogs. As a matter of fact, we have a picture for the YouTube version of the show, got up close and personal to sloths, snakes, and frogs, and these the red-eyed green frog.
Oh, so beautiful.
They're gorgeous, unreal. So I recommend you make a trip to Costa Rica and go to Topeka too if you want to.
Well, it sounds great, but I'll tell you, if I went, I think I would probably have to go for 2 weeks because it would probably take me like an entire day to go 50 yards.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. It really is. It really is. Kid in a candy store. Coming up next, Adriana will talk about Australia. Stacy will talk about Japan. That's on the Gardening Simplified show.
Greetings, gardening friends, and welcome back to the Gardening Simplified show. Today we are ripping up the script. We're doing things totally different because all three of us have taken some pretty amazing vacations. We've been lucky enough to do that over the past couple of months, and we wanted to tell you about what we did and what we saw and maybe get you inspired to take a vacation, a plant-based vacation of your own. So I am going to hand it over to Adriana, who's going to tell you about her trip to Australia. But before I do that, I do want to mention, since we're talking about Adriana, our editor and producer and who does all of our YouTube, of course, this is a great episode to join us for on YouTube because there are going to be so many photos, videos, stuff like that we took of our vacation. So if you are interested, it would definitely be a good one to tune in. Just go to YouTube and type in Gardening Simplified.
Yes. All right. So let's kick it off. I visited Australia and Tasmania in October. So while that was fall for us here in the Northern Hemisphere, it was spring down there. The first stop that I made was in Sydney. And in Sydney, I have to talk about the jacaranda trees. The scientific name is Jacaranda mimosifolia.
Yeah, that's it.
And it is in the family Bignoniaceae, which is the trumpet vine family. These trees have been growing steadily in Australia for around 150 years. They are not native to the area. They are originally from parts of Central and South America, and they think that the seeds were brought along with sea captains from South America. The species epithet means having leaves like a mimosa, and the leaves truly did look like a mimosa tree with that really fine kind of foliage, but they are not related.
Yeah, because mimosa is in the bean family, and jacaranda is in the Bignoniaceae, like you said. But the thing about jacaranda, and when I saw your picture on YouTube, because I was on vacation at the same time you were, and I looked at your picture on YouTube and I was like, oh my gosh, Adriana's there when the jacarandas are in flower. I am so jealous. I mean, you have to talk about what they look like when they flower.
Oh my gosh, yes. Especially being in Sydney, it's a big city. So seeing these vivid lavender blue flowers just lining the streets was incredible. It almost looks like you're looking through a UV filter or like a Dr. Seuss kind of tree, but they are absolutely stunning. And they do actually drop the flowers, so they kind of have a carpet-like effect, which I'm sure for some people, if they plant them by a pool or something, could be a little annoying, but along the streets, it was stunning. And actually, a fun fact is that studies have shown it to have anti-cancer activity, antimicrobial properties, and antioxidant capacity. And these characteristics may be used to fight off E. coli, staphylococcus, and leukemia. And these trees, like Rick, like it hot and sunny. And so next we'll move to Melbourne, or Melbourne, as they like to say. In the Royal Botanic Gardens of Victoria, I saw a Banksia plant. Are you familiar?
You know, I am crazy about anything in the Proteaceae, also known as Protea family. Australia is an epicenter, along with South Africa, for these plants, and they're just like nothing else that you have ever seen.
They are not. And so it was in the Botanic Garden, but walking along, it was kind of in a not conspicuous area, but it just stopped me in my tracks. It's a genus in the Proteaceae family with over 170 species, which I was surprised to find.
All of them fabulous.
All of them fabulous. Native to Australia and New Guinea, they can grow as trees or shrubs, and they are popular garden plants around the area. Most of the species, the flowers are quite distinguishable. They're kind of like a bottle brush, spiky cone of flowers that usually has like 100 to thousands of flowers in that individual kind of conical shape. And then it's actually, if you do run your hand along certain species, it does have like a bottle brush effect where it kind of feels bristly and hard a little bit. A nice thing about these flowers is that they produce tons of nectar, so they attract pollinators and nectar-loving birds. And guess what else?
What else?
honey possums.
What?
Yeah,
Get
they're
out.
these adorable little creatures. They look like mice, but they have elongated snouts, and they're perfect for getting that sweet, sweet nectar out. But I'll put photos in of these things because they are adorable.
Did you see one though?
No, I didn't. Sadly.
Got to go back.
I know. Yeah, just another reason. So then the foliage size and structure will vary depending on the species. But the fruit contains seeds in this protective structure, so it's still that elongated kind of shape. And most species will often open from exposure, so typically with fire. So bushfires are kind of important for this genus in most cases. And the seed pods are really unique looking. The old flower spikes, commonly referred to as cones, but they aren't technically cones, botanically speaking. But when they open, they kind of look like what I think of as a chorus of singing cartoon frogs.
Ooh, I love that.
Yeah. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they have they kind of open up like little mouths.
Yeah,
And, yeah.
exactly. So on top of that, these plants typically thrive in USDA zones 9 to 11.
And you can find them as ornamental plants in the U.S., not in Michigan, of course. But you can also get them as cut flowers sometimes. So
Yeah.
you can get your little Australia fix that way.
Yeah, it was funny because when we were in Tasmania, actually, we were on this popular hiking trail where it had beautiful vistas and overlooks. And I saw a protea flower, and it was just this perfect cut stem, but it was overlooking what they call Wineglass Bay. So it's like super picturesque area. And I was like, that's a weird spot. And I was looking all around for the plant, and I couldn't find it. Go down to a beach, another beautiful, picturesque spot. And there's another flower. And then it dawned on me that it was probably from a photo shoot that someone had been clipping these flowers and taking them along. So I wasn't likely to find the plant there. But so now moving over to Tasmania. I love Tasmania. I kind of describe it as Jurassic Park mixed with Scotland. It's this phenomenal landscape. There were so many plants here. It was kind of hard to pick which one, so I kind of picked two staples, and the first one being eucalyptus. And so eucalyptus is predominant everywhere in Australia and Tasmania. But what really struck me was the sheer size of some of these trees. I'm going to talk about Eucalyptus regnans, aka mountain ash, giant ash, swamp gum, and stringy gum. These are in the family Myrtaceae, and are native to Tasmania and Victoria. They're actually the tallest hardwood trees in the world.
Ooh,
so
that's cool.
Redwoods are softwood, and they're kind of up there as well. But these ones will often reach over 80 meters or 260 feet tall. And fun fact, regnans comes from the Latin word regnar, meaning to rule. So they kind of reign over the forest there. And it was really cool to see these. I saw these in the Huon Valley next to the Huon River in Tasmania, which is southeast Tasmania area. It was beautiful because you have these giant towering eucalyptus trees. The understory is all rainforest, so just seeing them pop up everywhere was absolutely phenomenal. The trunks are smooth with a beautiful cream, gray, brown coloring, and some flaky bark because that bark's got to go somewhere. And those ones actually grow mostly in cool, mountainous, rainy areas, so fitting for the Huon Valley. And because these trees want to tower over most of the rainforest, understory plants, they take on that live fast approach. So they grow very fast when they're young, and then they kind of peter out as they get a little older. But when they're young, they'll grow from 1 to 2 meters or 3 to 7 feet per year.
Whoa,
Yeah.
that's fast.
Yes, but unfortunately these trees are quite susceptible to fire, and they had actually had a fire in recent years that you could see the damage from some of those older mature trees. On the flip side, moving on from the eucalyptus is the Huon pine with a very fun scientific name, Lagerostrobos franklinii. And I practiced that one. Unlike mountain ash or swamp gum, which is a eucalyptus, the Huon pine takes the slow and steady approach to life. So this long-lived tree is only native to the wet rainforests of Tasmania.
Wow.
So it felt really special to see something that old and just kind of a staple to the land. It's not actually a pine, but a conifer in the Podocarpaceae family. Some have grown to be over 2,000 years old, making them some of the oldest living organisms on the planet.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and because they're so old, their tree rings have actually been used to help establish records of climate variation throughout the years, which I thought was pretty cool. And then another fun fact is that it's highly prized for its wood because it has a high oil content that makes it impervious to insects and also quite waterproof. So the high oil content also allows the wood to bend easier. All of these characteristics making it great for making boats. It was a sought-after lumber back in the day, so they were just cutting these trees down until they kind of realized, wait, these things grow pretty slow, and they take a long time to grow. So in the 1970s, there was a consensus that it is not sustainable to cut down 1,000-year-old trees, and they have since stopped doing that.
Well, thank goodness.
Yeah.
Someone learns a lesson.
Yeah,
at least.
right. But yeah, those were definitely some of my favorite. I mean, the fauna and flora down there is absolutely incredible. I saw little blue penguins, which were amazing, and I did cry. Wallabies, wombats, kangaroos. The birds were incredible. So it was a phenomenal time, and I highly recommend anyone who is interested in nature to absolutely visit Australia and Tasmania.
All right. I hear you on that one. And, Tasmania is not as like a place where I don't think people really prioritize for visiting Australia.
No, I mean, honestly, you were the one who informed me about it. And once you told me about it and I started looking it up and everything, it is just such a beautiful place. Everyone is so friendly. We stayed in Hobart, which is a really cool old town. And it was just incredible to see the variation of the natural landscape around there. From rainforest to dry eucalyptus forest, waterfalls to the coast, caves. It was just absolutely amazing.
And all on a relatively compact island.
A relatively compact island. I think it takes around 4 hours to get from one end of the island to the other.
Unless you're stopping for every bird.
Yeah,
tree.
yeah. It would probably take us at least 4 days.
I feel that. All right. So that's Adriana's recap of Australia. When we come back, I'm going to give you my recap of Japan. Greetings, gardening friends, and welcome back to the Gardening Simplified show. Like I said, we're ripping up the script today, doing things a little bit different, although we will have some mailbag questions in the final segment. We'll be back to our normal format next week, but we wanted to just share with you because, we travel for plants, we travel for food, we travel for experience, but, plants and gardens are a huge reason why I travel. And of course, when it comes to garden destinations, I think a lot of people know that Japan is sort of, one of the places to go to see gardens.
Amazing. I want to go someday.
You should go. It's a long flight, but it's absolutely worth it. Now, this was actually not my first time in Japan. I had been to Kyoto for my honeymoon. And if you want to see gardens in Japan, like the classic Japanese gardens, you have to go to Kyoto. That is really where all of these really famous, well-known gardens are. Kyoto was actually spared bombing in World War II, so these really old gardens have actually persisted, whereas Tokyo was completely destroyed in World War II and so had to rebuild. So you don't see as many of those older gardens, as many of those venerable old trees, although there certainly are some. But this time we did just go to Tokyo, and I saw a lot of really cool plants. But I honestly think that one of the coolest things, and this was true in Kyoto as it was in Tokyo, is that, the Japanese culture is just really, I don't even want to say like plant focused. It's just that nature and plants and the seasonal cycles are just such an intrinsic part of Japanese culture and eating and everything. And so it's just like there's this natural respect there for plants that is really lacking in a lot of places. And it really shows in the fact that even in Tokyo, which is considered the most populous city in the world, huge city, I think there's like 36 million people that live there. Any neighborhood street that you walk down, you see people create these little tiny container gardens outside of their homes and apartments. And I have some pictures of these. They just take a little assemblage of plants and put them out there for people to see and to kind of express themselves. And so you're really seeing these like miniature gardens everywhere that you go.
Beautiful. I've seen that from friends in Japan. There is just this appreciation for plants.
Yeah, so you don't have to like go to a park or anything to see this. And that was a very cool thing. So I have some pictures of that. It's kind of like, where do I even start? We did visit some gardens, and the gardens in Japan typically are either associated with a temple or shrine, or are like a historic park, part of a castle or a former samurai estate as well. So I think my favorite garden that we visited in Tokyo was Hamarikyu Gardens, which was a former samurai estate. It just had a lot of really cool features and things like that. And one of the things that it had were these seasonal beds of annuals. And there was a couple of them. Some of them were bare or had plants just getting started. But what was at peak when we were there was a huge planting of Cosmos sulphureus. So a lot of people know Cosmos, popular plant, and Cosmos sulphureus, rather than the typical pinks and white that you have in the Cosmos most people think of, is, as you might guess, with the sulphureus, yellow and orange. So there were these huge beds of yellow and orange Cosmos, and they were just, what's the verb that I even use to describe it? Just teeming with butterflies. I mean, I've never seen so many butterflies in my entire life. And I took a video of it. Doesn't do it justice. But as you sat there looking at this flower field full of Cosmos, I mean, there was just thousands of butterflies of different species everywhere. And it made it so magical and so interesting. So that was definitely a highlight, even though I think that a lot of people don't think of Japanese gardens as places to see flowers per se. You know, there's going to be hydrangeas, there's going to be camellias, that kind of thing. But I don't think most people think of them as like the traditional flower garden.
Yeah, more so evergreens, bonsai, Japanese maples.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly. Another really cool thing that I saw, and this, I'm not going to call it a weed because it is native to Japan and grows everywhere. And this is the first time I saw it. So even though last time I was in Japan was also in the fall, I had never seen this plant. And the plant is Trichosanthes pilosa, also known as the Japanese snake gourd. Now, the first time I saw this, we were just walking on the street, kind of getting from one area to another. We were just in transit, basically. It was hot. It was humid. I was getting tired and a little cranky, maybe. And there was just this sort of like railroad station with this vine growing all over it. And you have to see these flowers to believe them. They are so intricate. There are just hundreds of little filaments that start all curled up into the plant, and then they just unfurl into this like magical undersea creature looking flower that is just beautiful, pure white. And then when the flower matures, it becomes the snake gourd, which does not actually look like a snake. There are, of course, those long snake gourds that you see, but this is just kind of a small, round, orangey red fruit. And it turns out this is like a very kind of poignant association with autumn in Japan. And I actually bought a piece of fabric that had them printed on there. And it's really, so just a special thing that it was just growing unattended. And just really, really cool to see. So I definitely want to grow that from seed to kind of connect to that memory, and also because it is just incredibly beautiful. A lot of the plants that we grow in our gardens are actually native to Japan. And so it's very different, I think, seeing them in place where they're native, even if they're in a cultivated area like a garden. And one of those that I saw that was at absolute peak was Tricertus, also known as toad lily. Very popular autumn flowering perennial for shade, moist shade. And, in every garden that we went to, and in many of those little residential gardens that I mentioned, it was in full bloom and just so, so pretty. And again, just such a great association, really, with autumn. And, I thought of you, Rick, because lots of miscanthus.
Oh, love it.
It was fall,
Yes.
so plenty of miscanthus everywhere in flower, and just that beautiful, silky, tassel flower that they get. So you'll see some pictures from Shinjuku-goen, which is the national garden in Tokyo. Sort of around this beautifully landscaped pond with, cloud prune trees. And I'll talk more about cloud pruning in a moment. The miscanthus was just at peak and looking gorgeous.
Fantastic.
So Shinjuku-goen is a really special place. I saw so many amazing trees. And it's always funny, I think, like when you go to another country and see a North American native and you're like, whoa, that's so cool. Mm-hmm. And for me on this trip, that was actually seeing our native bald cypress, Texodium disticum, growing in Shinjuku-goen with the coolest leaves. You know how the Texodium gets the woody protuberances because it grows in wet soil? So it creates these knobby looking things.
Humps.
To be able to get some oxygen. And the coolest planting I think I've ever seen was actually in Japan. So there's a picture of that on YouTube. And ginkgo. So
love ginkgo.
I was there in the last half of October. And so it was really too early for fall color yet. Here in Michigan, I missed peak fall color here in Michigan and didn't quite get it in Tokyo. They were still probably a good month away from developing fall color. So the ginkgos didn't have their gorgeous gold fall color, but what they did have is fruit, and a lot of fruit. Now, if you're not familiar with ginkgo fruit, It stinks real bad.
Yes, it does.
It smells when the fruit falls off the trees. It sits on the street or whatever, sidewalk, gets stepped on, ferments in the sun, and starts to smell like vomit. The seeds are edible, and we were served them at many different restaurants. They're actually quite good, kind of like a nut. But yeah, in the U.S. now, basically all of our ginkgos are grafted. So you're only getting a male ginkgo, so you don't have to worry about those smelly fruits coming everywhere. You will still see them sometimes in cities, like I know in New York, like in older parks, you would still see some female ginkgos, but ginkgos have basically been grafted in the U.S. to be only male since probably the 1970s or thereabouts, but not in Tokyo. Lots of female ginkgos everywhere. So that made a little memorable smell memory for our trip.
So it was too early for the ginkgos to be brilliant yellow.
Yes.
Okay.
But definitely peak fruit season. So.
All right.
And it was hot and humid, so you can imagine the combination of all of those things. So Tokyo is home to the Japanese Imperial Palace, which is, of course, a big tourist attraction there. And, of course, we were going to go there. But what I was not prepared for with the Imperial Palace is that it is just surrounded by acres and acres of cloud-pruned Pinus thunbergii, or Japanese black pine. And when I say cloud-pruned, so you might not be familiar with this term, but cloud pruning is basically the term that describes the way we all think of like the way a Japanese tree is pruned, with that very meticulous, it's called cloud pruning because the foliage is all on the upper side of the branch, kind of hanging over it like a cloud. It's pretty labor intensive. You do have to start from a young age for the tree, not for the person pruning it. And every single year you have to go in and you have to do what's called cutting the candles. So, pines put these candles out. You have to go in and cut them at a certain point so that they will continue to grow in the direction that you want them to. And I mean, the Imperial Palace, I couldn't even begin to fathom a number of pines surrounding this place. It would have to be, it would have to be 20,000 or more. And I just cannot even imagine the labor that goes into it. And its timing is super crucial for cloud pruning. You can't just say, oh yeah, we'll get to that in a month. You have to get it when the candles are at a certain stage. So it was really just, I think, an incredible monument to the effort that goes into gardening, what it means to really, take care of something and have a vision for a garden or a plant. And yeah, it was just an incredible, incredible experience. And great food, great people. I loved every single minute of it, despite the heat and humidity, which was a little bit extreme. So we're going to take a little break. When we come back, we're going to answer some gardening questions before we wrap up the show. So please stay tuned. Greetings, gardening friends, and welcome back once again to the Gardening Simplified show. We always say that we love answering your gardening questions. That's one of the ways that we try to simplify gardening for you here on the Gardening Simplified show. And that's why in this vacation-themed show, we are devoting at least one segment to answering all those burning gardening questions out there, even though I think here in Michigan, the season is officially at an end.
It's at an end, but we can dream at Christmas time. And I love the fact that you go to Japan and you get some beautiful fabric of a snake gourd.
Yeah.
I love that. I go to Costa Rica and I end up in one of those touristy shops and get this cheap, tacky shirt that you see me wearing here on YouTube.
I like it.
Do you like it?
I like it a lot, yeah. And Adriana did get a clip-on koala that did not make it on air this time, but it's out there. It's out there. So
wonderful.
But anyway, if you have a gardening question for us, we know that just because the gardening season might end, your questions don't. And we answer questions about indoor plants and that kind of thing as well. So you can reach us at gardeningsimplifiedonair.com. There is a contact form there. You can fill that out. You can even attach a photo if you'd like and explain your issue. And we would be glad to answer your question on the air if we can.
Yeah, or send pictures of your garden this past year and dream with us.
That's right. That's such a good idea because, yeah, it is a little bit of a ways till next season. You don't tend to notice that in the holidays because you got a lot to think about. But once January hits, you're kind of like,
oh, boy. Well,
So,
Stacy, Tina writes to us, hi, Rick and Stacy. I love listening to your show. I learned so much. I've had this dilemma over a weigela. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. We've talked about that before.
Yeah, it is one of the ones that trips people up.
It has grown way larger than I thought it would, but I do not know the name. You can see that it says tall as the house, or it's as tall as the house. I've trimmed on it occasionally, but it just seems to keep growing. How far down can I trim it without killing it? I hardly ever see blooms, so that doesn't matter if they don't come back for a while. It's on the south side of the house, plenty of sun trying to take over. Northwest Florida, zone 8B. Any suggestions?
Yes. So the answer is in the question this time, interestingly enough. So what's happening here, Tina, is that your Weigela is not flowering because it's just too darn hot. Weigela is one of those plants like lilac or apple that actually needs a period of cold temperatures in order to set its flower buds for the following year. And in your Florida USDA zone 8B, that is just not happening. So that's why it's not flowering. So, in that case, I would potentially, I don't know why you're growing it or what you're hoping for it to sort of accomplish or what kind of role you want it to fill in your landscape. But if you wanted flowers and it's not doing that and it's not looking good, I would say just go ahead and take it out.
I would agree. Now, you're not going to kill it by pruning it.
That's for sure.
They respond well to pruning, but you're right.
Yeah, and so on that same note, if you do want to just keep it and give it a new lease on life, there, you can pretty much prune it. I wouldn't prune it flush with the ground, but you can certainly prune it to just a couple of inches above the ground. Get a chainsaw or some heavy-duty loppers or a handsaw. It is going to probably be a big job having such a large, mature one like this. But you can take that down to just 3-inch stubs, and it will start to come back, and the foliage will be fresh. And you can do this with almost all shrubs. There are some shrubs that take to it better than others. I know, for example, that elderberry doesn't take to this very well, but Weigela is one that certainly does. Yes. And that's called a rejuvenation pruning. And that'll give you a fresh start. Or if you know someone with a pickup truck and got a strong metal chain, then maybe it's time to just pull it out and put in something, that's a little bit more Florida. Take advantage of it.
Stacy, you say that so nicely. A rejuvenation pruning, in the industry, we'd call that a hack job. But either way you get there, I recommend it.
Well, I guess, hack job is what you say to the other people on your team.
There you go.
Rejuvenation pruning is what you say to the client. In
there
that case,
go.
Sounds a little bit nicer. Now, interestingly, now that it's December, we had a number of questions about holly. So I think people are getting ready to deck the halls. So our next two questions are two different questions about holly.
I see that, Stacy. Christine wrote to us from Quebec, Canada.
Bonjour, Christine.
So Christine says, first, I love your show. Thanks, Christine. Second, I bought a berry heavy gold winterberry on a whim at the end of season clearance sale. Don't you just love it? I love
such
those
a beautiful plant.
End of season bargains, and yes, beautiful. It came in a pot with a Mr. Poppins winterberry. Since it was mid-November, I just planted the whole thing, both the female and male, into a single hole. Come spring, should I separate the two shrubs and move Mr. Poppins away to give them space to grow? Or do I just let them grow together? I couldn't find any information on the plant tag or PW website. Thanks, Berry Mulch. And I didn't say that. Christine said that. Good job, Christine. Thanks.
Christine went for the double pun. The rare double pun.
I love it.
So, Christine, this is interesting because it is not typically sold that way. There's certainly no issue with it being sold. Obviously, it's much more convenient, not just for you, but for the garden center as well, because it can be difficult. You could to maintain adequate stock of both plants, the male and the female. And of course, holly needs both a male plant and a female plant, and only the female will set berries. But I would say you did the right thing by going ahead and planting it now together, but I would definitely separate these out come spring. And here is the reason why. In this case, berry heavy gold, fabulous plant, just so unique and so beautiful, is going to get to be, I didn't check the height before I came here, but a good 8 feet tall, if not bigger. Whereas Mr. Poppins is actually a dwarf variety. And so what is likely to happen is that since the female is larger and probably more vigorous, it's very likely to shade out the male. And if the male is in too much shade, it won't flower, it won't pollinate the female, and it will just end up kind of disappearing and negating its point of being in the same pot with the berry heavy gold in the first place.
I agree. They can enjoy the holidays together and the holly days together. But I agree. Next year, let's separate the two. Not too far, but let's separate the two.
Right. And, Christine did say within 50 feet of each other, and that is what we recommend. That is what universities recommend, because that is the average distance you can expect a pollinating insect to fly on its foraging trips to ensure pollination. So go for that splitting come spring, Christine, and enjoy 2 fabulous plants.
I love this question from Penny. Penny writes to us, I have 3 miniature Ilex rock garden plants. They seldom berry. What male pollinator should I get? My 2 red sprites don't have a male pollinator, and they are exceptional. This particular plant being a smaller plant, I was visiting Isley Nursery in Oregon.
Oh, they have such amazing plants.
It's incredible. And they had these growing in troughs and containers. What an interesting plant.
Yeah, and it is. So a lot of people aren't familiar with this. It's certainly not common. You aren't going to just see this at your run-of-the-mill garden center, but it is a very dwarf holly with small leaves, thick, pointy leaves. And yeah, it's called rock garden because it's the kind of plant that you'd put in a rock garden. It just grows as a nice kind of little tuffet. As I was reading about it in preparing for the show, grows about 1 inch a year.
Wow.
That is some slow growing, slow growing plants right there.
Patience is a factor,
which is great. It's kind of nice to have something that you don't have to worry about overgrowing its space, at least in your lifetime. But one thing that's interesting so rock garden is indeed a female holly. So you have the potential for berries, but I have to say, in every single source that I looked at through like the first 3 pages of Google, I did not find a single recommended male pollinator for this plant.
Now, I was going to ask you if you could put like a large castle wall holly somewhere in the yard and whether or not it would work.
Right. So the tricky thing here is that not only did I not find a specific male pollinator recommended, but even really reputable sites like the Missouri Botanic Garden just said it's a hybrid holly. Like they didn't say it's a blue holly or it's an English holly or it's any kind of specific holly. And the key to holly pollination, there's 2 crucial things. Number 1, they have to be of the same species so that genetics are compatible. And number 2, they have to flower at the same time, the male and the female, because of course, if the bloom times don't overlap exactly, you're not going to get full pollination. So it's interesting that your red sprites are doing so well. Red sprite is a winterberry holly, like the same kind that Christine was asking about. So this kind loses its foliage in winter. So what's happening there, if you live in a neighborhood, is your neighbor, or perhaps if you're out in the wild, a wild specimen is just pollinating those. But there is nothing around for your rock garden holly. And I'm not sure exactly what I would recommend since I wasn't able to find at least the species part. But yeah, I think that a blue holly like Castle Wall would be a good start. But the only thing that concerns me with that is I feel like they're such common landscape plants, blue holly, that if that could do the trick, probably a neighbor's blue holly would potentially already be pollinating pennies.
Yeah, you're right. I think the timing thing, you're right on. I think that's the problem.
It could be timing. The other thing is rock garden holly is not the hardiest of hollies, probably due to its hybrid nature. So another possibility is that the flowers are just being lost to cold, that the winter is killing the flower buds without actually harming the plant. So I would say look for those flowers to appear. If you have a friend who has a male blue holly, maybe get a little clipping of it when it's in flower, put it next to this one, just in a little vase or, jar or something like that to keep it hydrated and see if that works. Sometimes you just got to experiment. So we want to thank Adriana and Rick for sharing their incredible vacation experiences. And thank you all so much for listening. We truly appreciate you and hope you have a wonderful week ahead.